Thank you for inviting me to speak to you today. Alhamdulillah, I feel very blessed to have this opportunity. And Jazakallah khair to Brother Hassan. I don't see you, but thank you for facilitating and inviting me and introducing me. I want to talk about a very important topic about raising children and about the environment in which our children are growing up and the influences on our children. And I think this is a very pertinent topic given that many of you are parents. So if you're a parent, can you raise your hand? Okay, mashallah. And if you're a college student or younger, raise your hand. Okay, so inshallah, I hope that this will be very relevant and pertinent to you. Let me just give you a little background about myself and my story and why you might think that I have something to contribute or some ideas to contribute on the subject of parenting, Islam, and raising children in this cultural environment. So my full name is Daniel Haqiqatjou. My last name is Haqiqatjou. People ask me, well, what does that mean? What's the background? It's a Persian last name. It's Persian, and Haqiqat is Haqiqat, meaning truth, from Haq, of course. And Jew, so it doesn't mean the true Jew. That's not the last name. It means, in Persian, seeker of truth. Jew means seeker. So Haqiqatjou is seeker of truth. So I'm not actually a convert. Both of my parents are Muslim. I was raised as a Muslim. But I didn't really have much of a connection to a Muslim identity. I didn't feel very connected to Islam at all. And for the most part, I was living life as a typical teenage American. What happened later in life, alhamdulillah, as I got through high school, is I came into contact with good Muslim brothers in high school and then later in college, and they influenced me in a positive way. And alhamdulillah, this was a blessing from Allah, but it could have gone any number of different directions. I could have met other people. I might have come into contact with others who were not Muslim, and my entire life could have taken another direction where I didn't identify as a Muslim, I didn't practice Islam, I didn't uphold any of the tenets of Iman, belief. So alhamdulillah, I was blessed that Allah put certain people in my path and allowed me to learn from them and take from their example. I ended up going to Harvard University for my undergraduate studies. I studied physics and I studied philosophy. And as an undergraduate, this was a time where I was just getting more and more familiar with my Muslim identity. I started praying regularly, fasting, and being more concerned about what does Allah want from me? How am I going to stand before Allah and answer for the way that I'm living my life? And that was the consciousness that came in this period in college. But at the same time, I felt a large wave of attack on my faith and attack on my Muslim identity. This was through my classes. So as if you're in college or you've been through college, you know that there is a large secular influence, an atheistic influence in college. And so I felt that pressure. I felt Islam specifically was being attacked. This was happening in the Islamic studies departments, in philosophy departments, in cultural study departments, and just on campus in general. This was shortly after 9/11, this was still the Bush era, Bush presidency, and so there was a lot of social, intellectual, academic pressure on Muslims. So this was the context in which I was coming to learn more about Islam and coming into practicing as a Muslim and learning in general. So I felt pressure, but I responded to that pressure by wanting to learn more. Well, Islam has this to say about life. Allah says this in the Quran about how to live your life and how to be with other people and how to pray and how to worship and how to understand the world at large. And you have a university environment at Harvard and elsewhere that is attacking that and is critiquing that and is saying, you know, Islam is wrong about this issue, about there being a God. Islam is wrong about there being one God worthy of worship. Islam is wrong about this man, Muhammad ﷺ, being the final messenger. Because actually, you know, everyone has their own religious beliefs, and who's to judge whether one religion is right or wrong? We have to be tolerant and pluralistic. So anyone who says otherwise is wrong, and in fact is committing a moral wrong by saying this. So, scientifically, Islam is backwards. So all these different intellectual and moral critiques. And that's what I think all our youth in the world even, not even just in the American context, but increasingly in the world due to the influence of the internet and social media, is facing, is constant attack that Islam is intellectually irrational, Islam is morally wrong. And so we face this as youth, and what happens? What ends up happening? We see the signs all around us. Every community that I visit across the country, I hear stories of youth who are leaving Islam completely. They're abandoning Islam. And these aren't youth that had no connection to Islam in the first place. These were Muslims who were young Muslims who were coming to the Masjid. They were, some of them were even Huffaz. They had memorized the Quran. They were leading Taraweeh in Ramadan. And there was even one story where I was in New Jersey and this mother came to me crying that her teenage son, he had studied in one of the best Islamic schools. He had gone overseas to Turkey and had studied, he had finished memorizing the Quran. And then he went to college, and by the end of his freshman year, he had left Islam. He had decided that, you know, Islam doesn't make sense. I have these issues, and you could list them, 1, 2, 3, that don't make sense to me, and I don't understand how a prophet of God could come and teach this, and this, and this. And I don't accept that, so I can't be Muslim anymore. So there's a certain percentage of our youth who fall into this category where they completely leave. There's another larger section of our community that they don't know what they don't know. They don't recognize that their Iman, there's a problem with it. There's a problem in that they don't believe the right beliefs. They have the wrong beliefs about Allah. They're influenced by other ideas that are found within society. One quick example, one thing that I often hear youth say, and I'm surprised by it, is that, well, there's no way that we can know that Allah exists. There's no way that you can truly, absolutely know that Allah exists and that Islam is the truth. And these are Muslims, or they have grown up and they view themselves as Muslims, but they think that this is something that's okay to believe. And the reality is that Allah says, فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. فَاعْلَمْ. Allah says, know, He commands, know that there is no God except Allah. So Allah wouldn't command us to do something, to know something, if it were not possible. Right? And this is one of to have Iman, to have belief, you have to know. That's one of the conditions of having Iman, is to know that Allah exists. Along with other beliefs, to know that the Malaika exists, to know that the messengers were sent, to know that there are kutub that were revealed to the messengers, that there's a last day, that the qadr is a reality. These are all points of knowledge. You can't have Iman and be considered a believer if you don't accept and know these things to be true. So that's just an example of confusion and doubts that are facing our youth. And these stem, again, I mentioned at the beginning, there's intellectual and moral doubts. And in my personal story, in my personal life, I had to confront these questions and these issues because I had these same doubts. I had these same confusions. And there wasn't really available resources to help me address and to answer these questions and issues. And so, inshallah, as a community, we're learning and we're improving in providing and being able to provide these kinds of answers and resources. And that's what, as an introduction to myself, I've dedicated full-time to creating resources and to writing on these intellectual and moral challenges to Islam. And I do it from a background of having studied these traditions, these intellectual ideologies that are attacking Islam and Muslims. And this is the reflection that I want to share with you, is that it's not a coincidence that we see youth in different parts of the world all bringing up the same questions and the same issues, right? It's not a coincidence that youth in Tampa, Florida might be asking, well, why do men pray in front of women? How is that just? How is that fair in Islam? Why doesn't Islam accept or acknowledge freedom and equality the way the rest of the world does? Why don't we find this concept of secularism and separation of church and state within the Quran? Why? Isn't that the most ideal form of government, separation of church and state? Why isn't that found in the Quran? Isn't the Quran from God? Doesn't God know what's the best form of governance? We grow up in the school system here learning that separation of church and state is the ideal form of government that provides the most justice for the most people. Why isn't that found in Islam? Why doesn't Allah clearly spell that out in the Quran? These are some of the questions that arise. But it's not just local to Tampa or to the United States or to North America or to Europe. It's all over the world. All of these shubuhat, all of these doubts. You can find the same exact even expression of these issues as far as Indonesia, Turkey, South Africa, and America, all over the world. So is this a coincidence? Is this just chance that everyone's raising the same issues? No, it's not. It's all based from the same root. It's all coming from the same usul. There's standard ideologies that are taught and exported all across the world. Just like TV, satellite, and internet is broadcast all over the world and everyone is consuming the same kinds of things, these ideologies and these philosophies have been exported and transported all over the world, and they've colonized and affected, brainwashed, indoctrinated the Muslim mind. So if there's a systematic, what I'm trying to get across to you is that this is a systematic problem. It's a systematic problem. I've shared my experience, and I'm sure any of you who are younger especially have also experienced these things in your life. And if there's a systematic problem, you have to have a systematic response. If there's a systematic problem, you have to have a systematic response. If your opponent is playing chess, you can't play checkers, right? You have to play the same game. You have to be able to match wits with your opponent in order to respond to your opponent and to beat your opponent. So how are we going to respond to these challenges unless we also have a systematic approach and a systematic response? Otherwise, if we don't have a systematic response, we have to just address one issue today, and then tomorrow another issue comes up about women's rights. Next day it's about secularism. Next day is about LGBT and Islam. The next day, every single day there's going to be a new issue, a new controversy, a new source of doubt. And we're just, playing whack-a-mole. You know whack-a-mole? Right? And it's a carnival game. You just, one mole head comes up, you whack it. Next one, you whack it, and so forth. This is not productive. This is not an intelligent approach and response. So, but we don't have, as individuals or as parents, you don't have time to go and study philosophy. You don't have time to go and understand the systematic problem. You don't have time for that. You can't go back to school. So this is something that myself, others, are dedicating ourselves to, is actually going to the root of these ideologies, going to the usul, and addressing them on that level. So that once you cut the roots of these isms and these ideologies, then you address the source of the problem. And once you address the source, then that's the kind of systematic response that will, bi'idhnillah, help so many of our youth and so much of the Muslim community facing these questions and these shubuhats and doubts. One thing that I want to address now is this question of intellectual approaches to Islam. How do we intellectually address doubts? Does intellectual revival have any place in Islam? So let me tell you a story of the greatest general that the world has ever seen. Who is the greatest general of history? Khalid ibn Walid. Have you heard of the Sahabi? Khalid ibn Walid. He is recognized as, even by non-Muslims, as the greatest, one of the greatest, if not the greatest general of history. And imagine, he was able to conquer one of the superpowers of his time, which is the Persian Empire. He was, as the general, he led the Muslims towards conquering Persia. And even he could have, Allahu Alam, but he could have even conquered Rome, which was the second superpower of the time. Persia and Rome. And his military prowess and knowledge was world-renowned by that time. By the time he had finished with the Persians, everyone knew Khalid ibn Walid. He's one of these Arabs with this new religion. And he's conquering everyone. And so he had even struck fear into the hearts of the Romans, because they were afraid that they were going to be next. They were going to be the next ones that are conquered by the Muslims. But, that didn't happen. Khalid ibn Walid's career was cut short. But his life is something that we should reflect on. His life is something we should reflect on. And how he became Muslim is very interesting, and this is where I want to put emphasis, is he had actually been the main person that had given the Muslims defeat in the Battle of Uhud. He was actually the one that caused the Muslims to lose in the Battle of Uhud. And after that, he started slowly having doubts about the religion that he was upon and his alliance with the Quraysh. And he slowly started considering Islam because his brother had become Muslim. And his brother had said something very interesting and very important to him. His brother told him that it amazes me that someone as intelligent as you does not recognize the truth of Islam. Someone as intelligent as you has not recognized the truth of Islam. And so that started to get him thinking that, well, I do consider myself intelligent. Why don't I see that Islam is the truth? I feel this attraction to the Prophet ﷺ and to Islam, but he wasn't entirely convinced. But then the Prophet ﷺ told or asked Khalid's older brother, Walid ibn Walid, where's Khalid? Where's Khalid? Because someone as intelligent as Khalid should recognize the truth of Islam. So the Prophet ﷺ re-emphasized intelligence, that Khalid is intelligent. He should recognize the truth of Islam. And so this is very important for us to understand how intelligence and being intellectual is correlated with Iman. Because what does it mean to be intelligent? How do we define this? This is very important. It's very important for us to have an understanding of intelligence because our youth, our children, and I'm a father myself. I have 4 boys. And I'm trying to raise them in this world and protect them from all of these attacks. And so how do we define intelligence for our youth such that they're not going to be confused? What are we going to say to our youth when they say, Baba, Mama, why are all the smartest people in the world atheists? Why are all the greatest scientists and researchers and academics, why are they atheists or why are they non-Muslims? How are we going to answer this question? This is a very easy, obvious question for a child to think. Even if they don't ask it, even if they don't articulate it, maybe they are thinking that. Maybe they are wondering why. So we have to define intelligence. We have to define our own terms. We shouldn't let others define terms for us. We should accept the definition that Allah has given, that the Prophet ﷺ has given for these terms, like intelligence and aql, reason. And there's an amazing narration from the Prophet ﷺ where he is describing the signs of Yawm al-Qiyamah, the signs of the end of time. And one of them is amazing because he says that in the end of time, a man will be complimented for his intelligence. And people will say, wow, he's so intelligent, he's so broad-minded, he's so intellectual, and he won't have any Iman in his heart. That's the time we're living in. That's the time we're living in, where the most intellectual and intelligent people, those who are considered to be the most intelligent and the most intellectual, are not Muslim and they have no Iman. In fact, they're atheists. They even deny God. So we live in that time, whereas in the past, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, it was the opposite. You couldn't be considered intelligent unless you had Iman. You couldn't be considered intelligent unless you had Iman. So now things have flipped. Everything is backward. And this is proven in several different ways. One is the example of Khalid ibn Walid, that the Prophet ﷺ was amazed that someone so intelligent was not a Muslim, was not a believer, had not recognized reality. Because that's what intelligence is. Let's define intelligence. Okay? Intelligence means recognizing reality, seeing reality. And what is the greatest reality? Al-Haq. It's Allah. The existence of Allah. That Allah is Rabb. Allah is the Lord and the Creator. And that we worship Him. That is the greatest truth. So how can you be intelligent? How can you be intelligent if intelligence is recognizing the truth, if you don't recognize Allah and you don't submit to Him as a Muslim and worship Him? And just as a caveat, when I was growing in my understanding of Islam, it's a learning process. So just in case someone is not in a position where they have fully understood and accepted with yaqeen, with full certainty, all the tenets of Islam and Iman, the pillars of Iman, you shouldn't be worried that, oh, well, am I not a Muslim now? Or, ooh, maybe I have left Islam. So any of our youth who are facing those kinds of doubts, just because you have doubts now doesn't mean you're not going to learn more. So you should always seek knowledge and not feel like your Iman is at stake or your Iman is going to be lost just because you don't have full certainty in yaqeen at this time. Everyone is working on their Iman, and as the Prophet ﷺ said, you go through different levels of Iman at different times. You feel different levels of closeness to Allah at different times. So I just want to put that out there as well, without taking away from what I want to highlight and emphasize, which is you cannot be considered intelligent without Iman. And this is what we need to teach our youth, so that they understand from a young age who are the role models? Who are the role models? Who do they consider intelligent, smart? Who are they looking up to? Are they looking up to atheists, those who deny God, those who deny Allah, those who deny Islam? Or do they have scholars of Islam as their role models? Or the Anbiya? Do they understand that the Anbiya are the most intelligent of all creation? The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ibrahim alayhi salam, Isa alayhi salam, Musa alayhi salam. When you read their stories, you can just see their intelligence, their wisdom, their knowledge. And then look at the inheritors of the prophets, which are the scholars, the ulama. These need to be our role models, not only spiritually. This is the problem that we fall into. We say, yes, of course we respect the ulama. We respect Imam Abu Hanifa. We respect Imam Ahmad, Imam al-Shafi, Imam Malik. Of course, we respect them as spiritual, moral guides, leaders, intellectuals. But we don't consider them to be geniuses. We don't consider them to be intellectual role models. This is the problem that we have, where intelligence has been defined for us. And we've been indoctrinated into accepting a definition of intelligence that contradicts Islam and puts Islam in a bad light. Another example is how some of our youth have accepted this idea that you need a leap of faith. To be Muslim, you need a leap of faith because you can't, again, know that God exists with certainty. You have to have a leap of faith. Has anyone heard this expression, leap of faith? It's a Christian idea. It's coming from Christian philosophy. And the idea that they had was that you cannot rationally recognize God. You cannot rationally justify God. You have to make a leap. Blindly. You blindly believe. Because reason and religion are two separate things. They're incompatible. As soon as you leave the realm of reason, that's the place of faith. And as soon as if you want to be reasonable, you have to put faith aside. You have to abandon your faith. This is how they have defined for us rationality, reason, reasonability. We have to redefine these terms in light of the Quran and Sunnah. So what does Allah say about haqq? Many things. Allah is, in the Quran, constantly refers to قَوْمِ يَعْقِلُونَ. Right? So Allah says, قَدْ بَيَّنَّا لَكُمُ الْآيَاتِ إِن كُنْتُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. Okay? We have clarified, bayyina, for you, lakumul ayat, the signs, our signs, if you reason, if only you were to reason. Okay? Inna fi dhalika la ayatin liqawmi yaqilun. Indeed, in this are signs for those of reason. Right? Inna fi khalqi as-samawati wal ard واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب. أولي الألباب, meaning those of insight, those of understanding. Allah uses the term أولي الأبصار, أولي النهى, أولي الألباب, قوم يعقلون, أفلا تعقلون. Don't you understand? Aren't you people of reason, reflection? Constantly reminding us that you have to be able to recognize the signs around you, in the world, in the dunya. This is not unseen. The signs of Allah are not part of the ghaib. This is a misconception. This is a misconception that we can't recognize the signs of Allah that point that, yes, Allah is one. Allah is the creator. Islam is the deen of truth. There are signs in the world around us and within our own selves that we have to recognize. It's not blind faith. If you have reason, if you have rationality, then there's only one conclusion: that Islam is the truth. And if you don't recognize that reality, if you